everybody, and welcome to the at-home edition of Ghosts of Dufferin County and Beyond. I hope everyone's doing well out there, keeping safe, keeping healthy. I know we're all in this together. We're excited to put some new episodes together, again, from home this time, which I think is really lovely because I love introducing you to my space, and I hope you like having me in yours. Today, we have an amazing show put together. I have a wonderful human being who I have had the pleasure to work with before. We are welcoming to the show, to our Zoom studio today, Suzanne Northrup. Suzanne is an internationally acclaimed medium, a grief and bereavement expert. She is a TV and radio host, and she's authored 3 books to date. So super, super incredible. She has helped thousands of people worldwide heal from the loss of loved ones through the work that she does. So welcoming to the studio, we have Suzanne. Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Marianne.
We're so excited to have you. And I know that the viewers at home have been wanting to have a private conversation with you. And so my hope is that we get to do that today, and that's going to be amazing. Tell us, Suzanne, how long have you been doing your work as a medium?
To be honest, this is the only job I've ever had. This is the only job I've ever really had. So, I don't kind of know any. I mean, I think I did deliver telephone books when I was like 19 or 20 or something like that. But other than that, this is like the only gig I've ever had.
That's amazing. So what does that put you to, maybe 30 years in this work, something along those lines?
Yep, 35 years. Yep.
Yeah. And tell us, where do you come from? Where are you coming from today?
Well, actually, I'm in New York. I actually was raised in. People think New York is just New York City, although I do, live in New York City. I have a place in New York City because you just do. But people think of New York as just New York City, but actually I was raised in a farm community in the western part of the state. And now I'm not there now. So because when you're raised in that, I don't have to tell you, it's kind of always sort of in your blood, even though you move to the city and you do all that and whatever it is, you kind of like having a space out of it. So as of March the 13th, when COVID hit New York City,
yeah,
and I happened to be literally on that day, I was literally getting ready to leave for Chicago for an event, and then an event in Denver after that, and then an event in Vegas after that. So as of Thursday, when the event that I was doing in Chicago was they were holding at a university. I got a phone call from it was actually IAMS. I'm sure you know IAMS stuff, International Near-Death Experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
yeah.
So I was doing their Chicago chapter, which is actually the biggest chapter in the States. Anyway, so I got the phone call, like they weren't going to allow obviously anybody in the auditorium. And it was probably good that I got it the day before because I was flying out the next day. I don't have to tell you, during this time when one had to change a whole lot of plans and travel and hotels and all that other sort of stuff. And then I was going from there to Denver, and then I was going from there to Vegas. So I had to change all of those connections at that time. And that was a Friday afternoon, Friday the 13th, literally it was Friday the 13th. And I just said to myself, you know what? This is obviously not happening. I had to cancel all of these trips. And I just said, it's time to get out of Dodge. Fortunately, because I travel so much, even though I have assistants, I do all my own travel because I'm pretty anal about, I like to go on certain airlines, and it's a lot easier for me to do it than having somebody else designated. But in any case, I got on it right away, immediately got a rent-a-car. And the next day, because I didn't have my car with me because I was in the city. My car was at my house, and then I got a rent-a-car, got it to Albany, got to my house, and have been not since in New York since then. And
wow.
Now we're in November. Yeah.
So. Yeah. I mean, when I hear you talk about that, right? Like so many of us, this is a shared experience. Now, yes. Everything in life halted. And I think for some people it halted in bigger ways and more catastrophic ways, and for others of us, in ways that we've been able to manage. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. I feel pretty blessed that I have. Yeah. First of all, pretty blessed that I have a place, out of the city, where you can take walks out in the woods and take wherever it is without masks and not have to kind of like worry about that. But we're all wherever we're supposed to be through whatever it is. One of the things that I have said this to people, and I know that you are as significantly know that as well as I tell people, make no mistake, make no mistake that we are all here at this time for this reason. I mean, I'm not saying this is the only reason we're here, but whomever's living through this pandemic is here for a reason.
Yeah.
Only you and your soul will know what that's about, but that is sort of the deal, you know.
Yeah,
I said this to one of my media guys. I said, like, well, you know, they always say, like, you have to prepare for kind of rainy day. And he goes, yeah, but I didn't think I was going to have Noah's Ark. So
that's right.
So this goes beyond sort of a rainy day. But I do believe that we're all in this together. What I think is a very, very interesting thing, and obviously you live in Canada and it's a different country. I live in the States. We know that we've had some interesting things going on in the United States these days. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because it's almost like when everybody's sort of on a sinking, I use this as an analogy, and actually I don't know where I picked it up, but when everybody's like sort of on a sinking boat, and then you have somebody that's in the back of the boat that, you know, they see the water coming up through and they go like, I don't want to bother with that. I'm not going to bother. I'm going to do what I want to do, even though the water's coming up through here, because that's what I want to do. And it's sort of like, yeah, but the whole boat is sinking. Yeah, so it's right. Like, it's only you in your room wanting to like not do what the program is here, but like, this is like everybody's in this program. And for people to not think that there's a program that exists or to not be on board with it is a real, as you would say, reflection upon human nature. And I don't, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't seem to think it's as significant in Canada as it certainly is here. But you know, as you well know, people have karmas, countries have karmas, cultures have karmas. Sure. You know, and whatever, you know, that is, I mean, like we started out this country with, you know, the Boston Tea Party, because it was, we, you know, started out in revolution. That was what, you know, the United States started at. And because that is a seed, and you know astrology enough, if that's kind of in this chart, that's kind of what it is.
Sure. Yeah.
But within that, it's sort of like, okay, but we needed to do that because we needed to be our own country, and that was part of it. We didn't want to be part of, you know, the Commonwealth of England. And in order to do that, we had to do the Boston Tea Party, and we obviously we've done everything we could to get our freedom. Mm-hmm. Now here we are in 2020, and that is taken to another level of where, like, well, I'm going to do what I want to do because this is kind of like a free country. Yeah. And so it's kind of a really interesting thing to sit in. And I think probably like you, one of the things, because I watch these YouTubes of these people, that what they have to go through in the health field, which I think is an amazing, and I think it's really about how we give for our own, of our own lives. Sure. To really sort of save others. And I say to people like, well, I have to be really an honest of truth here. I have spoken, I don't know about you, but I have spoken to quite a few people who have died of COVID. I mean,
yeah, it's
I have spoken to the dead people who died of COVID. Mm-hmm. And, obviously probably most of those people don't tune into quote unquote what you and I do for a living. But when you've spoken to dead people who died of COVID, and you and I both know that in the line of work, when it's about dead people, 90% of the people that really go through the pain and the sorrow are the living people, because we're left here.
That's right.
And one of the things that I've experienced with this is that, these families, they can't see their loved ones.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If they have these incredible people that are healthcare workers that give so much, and then on top of that, they're giving the phones or holding the phones to the ears of these people that are in the process of their transition. So it's we're all kind of in this boat together. And for the people to think that they aren't, I mean, there are people that are dying of COVID in the hospital that don't believe in COVID, and the practitioners have to kind of like live with that. So it's interesting because when you live in a world where your life is about dealing with death, which, interesting enough, I'm always amazed that it's still the number one fear. That always, to me, is always a mind boggle. But how that we as human beings, it's all about connecting, and it's all about how sometimes we have to step outside of ourselves, and be the greater one, to be of of service and help in circumstances. And there's so many people who do all that. I mean, there's not a question about doing that. But
That's
when
right.
you see somebody dying and they can't, they're so disconnected with why they're dying, and it's got, I mean, they said they'd rather have cancer than have COVID. I mean, it's, to me, it's just kind of like a mind boggle. And especially when you see somebody that you love go through it, it's so we have layers of this that we don't have normally. Normally you can be with a person that dies if they've chosen for you to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And normally you can go through the honoring process, which you can't really kind of do that. And I'm sure, like you, they're doing things like, they know this person on the street died and they line up their cars and they honor them. And I think that's all kind of wonderful things. I know they do a lot of that stuff in New York.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm of the ilk that most New Yorkers are normal.
Well,
at least normal in the fact is that, we know that this is a reality because our state got hit first. And
sure did.
And there was no way in heck that when you watch them go out the doors into these big containers across the street from where you live, like, what's in those containers? Well, I don't think it's filming equipment.
That's right. Yeah.
You kind of like to know that. So that's by itself is a thing within itself. But speaking about what it is that when you do grief work.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that, grief work, as you well know, is not just dealing about deadbeat people. Grief work is about any kind of loss.
That's right.
And not only are these people losing people to death, but they've lost their jobs, they've lost their incomes.
Yeah.
And that does a ripple effect from your home and how you take care of your children. And I'm sure you know this, being a mom, that the people that I know that have children that are unbelievable teachers of their children have always thanked teachers, but now they thank teachers more than they ever have in their life.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
It's sort of like, wow, you didn't think teachers were important until you had the pandemic.
Yeah, it hits a whole new level, doesn't it?
It's a whole new level, is it? Yes,
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually know two guys from Canada that have two sons, one 7 and 9 or 10 and 11, two boys at home in an apartment in New York City during COVID. Yes, and they're both doctors, and it was just sort of like, they go like, that was the hardest part for us, was doing all that.
Yeah.
And so, it puts away a whole other thing on it. And then I know we've talked about this, and then, my sister's that's in California, she says, but on some level, and we all know that for every side of the coin, there's always two sides of the coin. And people that are oh so busy now that they don't have these mega commutes, they're getting to spend more time with their families.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think it's really interesting too, because all the things that you're mentioning, Suzanne, and I know you've experienced this too, during COVID, the work that we do, it really hasn't changed in terms of, how much work we do or what that looks like. But it has changed a little bit in that a lot of folks who, again, we may not be able to connect the dots between why this might be presenting for us, how our life's impacted by it, and now what can I do with that? I found that I've worked with a lot more folks over the last almost year now.
Right.
What are we, 9-10 months into COVID, working with them in spiritual guidance, helping them to understand what these opportunities are for them in this time. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold us right there. Okay. I'm going to do a commercial break, and we will be right back.
Season's greetings and happy holidays from Dufferin Life. May your holidays be sprinkled with love and goodwill, and the coming year filled with joy, laughter, and prosperity. Happy holidays. Be safe.
Season's greetings to all of you from your friends here at the Parlor Project. We're wishing you happiness and joy and a chance to connect with all your family and friends.
Hi, it's Melinda from Move with Melinda. Here at Rogers TV, we want to thank you for having us in your home. We want you to have a happy holiday and, most importantly, a safe and healthy new year.
I'm Marianne Kennedy. And I'm Dawn Rockall. Wishing you a safe and happy holiday season from Ghosts of Dufferin County and beyond.
I'm Liz Fazzato.
And I'm Gord Purdy.
And we're wishing you
a very, very
Merry Christmas from our family
to yours. All the best.
Welcome back to Ghosts of Dufferin County and beyond. If you're just tuning in, today I have the pleasure of welcoming internationally acclaimed medium, bereavement expert, Suzanne Northrup. Suzanne is joining us from the US today, and we're so excited to have her. So, Suzanne, I want to ask you, in your long career, and you've done this longer than most people, which is
I'm kind of like the pioneer, the queen
yeah,
of
yeah, and I would
Yeah.
absolutely put you in that category, and
Yeah.
so many of us would, right?
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, in that long career, are there a couple of things that you've done that sort of like really stand out for you? I mean, I imagine the list is going to be really long, but what are a couple things you've done in those 30 years that you really remember? You keep it at top of mind.
Well, there's a few things that I am going to bring up that I think is important, but this is one of the ones that I'm going to sort of bring up that I don't think people really sort of think about. First of all, when I started doing this as a profession, there was no one else doing this profession. Number one, and within that, this was completely, and I know you understand what this is about. It was completely about service. It wasn't about anything else.
That's right.
I worked on the streets of New York for $3. $3.
Yeah.
I'm thinking myself, $3. I will bet my bottom dollar you don't know anybody who worked in dead messages and did the work that I do for $3.
Right.
Okay. Actually, even because of that, I haven't raised my prices in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Because
okay.
I came out of that, it was all about service.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you didn't go into this, you certainly didn't go into for money. You certainly want to. So I came from what I call old school. So
yeah.
the people because I was basically a kid, really, I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
I got connected to this entire community of mediums and spiritualists in what I call LA, which is really the city of angels. So there was a huge kind of an underground movement during that time.
Fascinating.
It was really quite fascinating and actually very, very special, because within this process of ethics, it was just sort of like, you kept your mouth shut and you took everything in terms of the honor. Yeah. And in terms of like you wore it or you were going to wear it. Or
right.
if you didn't take that responsibility with that ethics, you were going to have a rug pulling party that you won't even know what hit you until you landed on your rear
end. And that's still true today, right? That's
still true today.
Absolutely.
However, now there's so many different mediums around.
It's true.
And I don't have to tell you that sometimes with numbers, it's a good thing. And sometimes with the numbers, it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Because somebody studies for 6 months and they think they can do it for profession.
That's right.
Good luck.
Yeah. So guys at home, I've talked about that, right? The importance of good, slow unfoldment in mediumship. Yeah. And then we have sort of a pioneer of our craft, right? She's talking about the same thing. So
yeah, I did this work for close to 3 or 4 years before I even started collecting my $3.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that I think is a very important thing of the ethics it needs to do. Mm-hmm. So in 1992, I was approached by HBO. They were doing a documentary called Life After Life. It was Linda Ellerby's company. Most people know Linda Ellerby. It was called Lucky Duck Productions. She is a very famous journalist. And so what happened is that there was this whole thing going on, believe it or not, in this early 90s, where people were wanting to connect, spiritually. There was a big movement. You had, Neil Donald Walsh, and there was money over hands over foot that were going into this at this particular time. And you had Hay House that was starting out. And so, they wanted to know why there was such a thing that was sort of going on there. So, being journalist and Linda being one of the top of the field, she goes, let's do some exploring this. So they started doing some exploring. In the meantime, they found this guy who was this professor at the University of Arizona. They found that he was kind of doing these underground studies called survival of consciousness after death. So they said to him, listen, if we could bring you, 2 or 3 or 4 of the top mediums in the country, would you allow us to film you in terms of your studies? And let's just see where we are with this. Well, you know television. I know television very well. I actually know Hollywood television very well. So it's kind of a different thing. So interesting enough, HBO didn't trust Gary, and Gary didn't trust HBO. And of course, as the mediums, we got thrown into this, not even knowing that one didn't trust the other. What was interesting about that was because Gary didn't trust HBO, he owned the footage and still to this day owns the original footage.
Okay.
So HBO was only allowed to use what he allowed without saying that they had edited and they did all these tricky things. Like, who's going to risk their reputation as journalists to make mediums look good and vice versa? But we kind of learned about that later. So the whole premise is that you would bring, there were John Edward, George Anderson, me, and I can't remember her name now. She just passed a couple of years ago. So there was actually four of us, actually five of us, because there was a woman who was kind of a housewife that he was sort of starting out with this. So the whole premise of the studies was basically it. We had sort of like the Zoom room here. We had a screen between us, and then you had a sitter.
That's
Now,
right.
in order to get the sitter, what they had to do is they had to find somebody that they thought would be very good subject matter. So I'm sure you're aware of Judy Guggenheim, her book called Hello After Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
They contacted her because she'd had, thousands of people that have had near-death, after-death communications.
Yeah.
So there was one woman who was in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, that they thought would be a good subject because she had a lot of loss. She lost a son, she lost a lot of her family. So they figured that she'd be perfect, and she was willing to do it.
Okay.
So when you do studies, and everything has to do with proof, and the only way you can prove things is by you have to have several different people that are doing the same things, and they all do data, and it's all based on data.
That's right.
It was a whole new world for me, this whole science thing. So they had 5 different mediums, and they had a screen between us, and they had the sitter. Now the doctor was sitting at the computer watching the graphs of the information that was coming through, and it was only yes and no. They were only load yes and no. They would ask the questions, but we only had yes and no answers. Yeah. Do you know who this person is and who that person is? And then they put all that data into the computer, and then they figure out the percentages of accuracies of the media.
That's right. And your accuracy, Suzanne, was the highest of all of them. Is that right?
Yes, I was in the 90 percentile. But
Yeah.
But what was kind of interesting is that they based this on basketball, because basketball is big in Arizona, which I didn't know about. But it's just sort of like, I was just saying, who do you think is like one of the, I could maybe ask Todd, who's considered to be one of the best basketball players in the world? Who would you say? You got to know that. I'll give you a hint. I'll give you Michael Jordan. Let's say
Michael Jordan. Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a medium, we all know everything's based on hits, percentages of how many things are accurate or not. So,
Yeah.
But he was part of a team. So individually, what do you think his percentage of hits were?
70, maybe 75.
No, actually only 40%.
Okay.
Because as an individual, he's 40%.
Right,
But as a
okay.
team,
Yeah,
as
of
a
course.
team, they
Yeah.
would go in the 90 centile. So
Okay, got it.
although I scored the highest in the
Yeah.
90 percentile, as a team, we all work between 80 and 90% between
Yeah.
the 5 of us.
Yeah, and that's really
interesting.
be as a professional as well, right? That's really where you want to be.
Yeah, and what was also kind of really interesting about that whole thing was that is that the same person, which is interesting because the sun came through for everybody. But not only the sun came through, but there was this little dog, this little Chihuahua, Pee-wee, who was 26, who died right after her son died.
Ugh.
And Pee-wee would come through he became like the star of the whole show of all the people that was sort of like coming through. But
Yeah.
anyway, there was a book written after by the way, you can still see that documentary.
I want to let our viewers know at home too. So we're talking about Life After Life.
Yes.
We're talking about the HBO documentary, and you can look that up. And of course, the book is the Afterlife Experiments. And if you
Yes.
scan a couple of the shelves you have here, you're going to find that book somewhere back there.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend watching and reading for incredibly fascinating work and to learn more about Suzanne. It's amazing.
Well, what's good about it is a lot of people that are into science and may not believe in mediumship. It's a good way for them.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, believe it or not, I still get a lot of clients from that.
Absolutely. And it's funny, for the students that I work with, you guys will recognize, we're talking about data. I often call the evidence portion of a reading, which is about 75, 80% of what you're doing, the data collection period, right? And we want that. And so I often use that term.
Yes,
so it's funny
yeah.
hearing you say that too. Tell our viewers at home, Suzanne, what do you have going on right now? What's coming up? Anything that, folks might want to know about so they can connect?
Sure. Well, I'm doing a lot of Zooming.
Yeah.
I'm still like you. I still do privates. I do obviously family groups as well, but I've always done small groups because I've always felt that was really important for some people that they like the groups and they pay less money. And so instead of doing 8 people, which I ordinarily do for the Zoom thing right now during COVID, it's a limited to 4 people.
Okay.
So I have those. I have 2 of those a month that are coming up. I've also got galleries.
Yeah.
I have a gallery, which I think is $25. I got another one that's $20. I got one that I'm doing with Thomas John in December coming up.
Yeah.
And I started, when I started doing all this, I started this at the beginning of the year, right before COVID. They must have known something upstairs. It was probably in one way the worst time to do it because it cost a lot of money. But in another way, it was probably the second time to do it. I started doing a membership.
Yeah.
And part of that all came about, interesting enough, well, the first question you asked me, because I've been doing this work for so long. I have like so much material, and I got so much media. I got like media stuff at a time that no one even did stuff in media. I mean, I was on Extra. I was on, MSNBC when The Sixth Sense came out, and I got all this media that no one really has, which I think is really cool. Plus, I have all these podcasts. Plus, I've had my own radio show. I had my own television show in Canada. You know that.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, there's some of this material people have never seen. So when you talk about where it was in the early 90s, I've got a lot of media stuff to cover. So I decided to put together a membership, and within that, people they can be part of my gallery, part of my Facebook things, and then I do webinars within them. So it's really, in some ways, I'm working harder, but it's all good, and what's wonderful about it is that people. They are freaked out right now. I'm not telling you something you don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think it's given them a sense of peace, because besides saying that, that we're all in this for a reason, we're not only all in this for a reason, but I know this is true. One of the things I've always shared, because, I live in New York, and I was in New York for 9/11. And I remember very, very vividly that a client of mine, who had been a client of mine many, many years, her son was in the towers the day he got his job at Canton Fitzgerald, which everybody know the whole entire company went down. It was an investment company. And the only person that actually survived, believe it or not, was the CEO. Most of the people died. Anyway, so she called, she found it was his first day at work. And he called, and he was on the 90th floor, and he called his mom, and he goes, "Mom, I can't believe I forgot my briefs. You got to bring them into the city. You got to bring them into the city." She gets into the car. She comes in the city, goes to the Lincoln Tunnel. And while she's in there, the first tower was hit.
Okay.
By the time the second tower hit, her son, who happened to be going down the subway to come up to meet his mom, is not even aware that the towers have been hit.
Wow.
So she says, "You get your rear end in the car, and we're going home." He goes, "No, I got to go." "Oh, no, you're not." So, the city went on lockdown.
That's right.
People don't know, because it's surrounded by water. And so they got over the bridge, and they got to Long Island. And I never forget the story, because she called me right afterwards, and she said, "If I didn't know you, I would never believe it." But she says, "I was going along the North Shore," and she goes, "I looked up, and there were millions of butterflies."
Wow, this is incredible. Suzanne, we are so blessed to have you on the show today. We need to do part 2. Say yes?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you so much for sharing these stories with us.
Yes.
I love
that's
that.
a good one, because it tells you that there are mass pass suicides, which is kind of what I was saying here. Is that there are mass passings, and all those people that were at 9/11 were supposed to be there, and everybody in this pandemic are supposed to be here.
Right.
So it's like you're dealt the deck. It's like what you do with it.
What do we do with it? Yeah, it's a great way to end that segment.
Yeah.
I want to thank Suzanne for coming on, and we'll dive into more of this, because of course Suzanne is an endless well. Thank you so much for coming on. You're going to look Suzanne up at SuzanneNorthrup.com, and thank you for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next episode.